Okay, welcome back. This is going to be part two for debits don't equal credits. What to do. I'm going to just pick up where I left off. So if you haven't seen part one, go to part one, and also be sure to, when you're watching part one, it'll explain where to pull down the document that has the steps listed so that you can read that and review it, and then you'll be able to just follow along. Okay, so let's see here. What we had done in the last video was we had made a copy of our journal and put the original on the side, and then we went and we started looking at each and every individual journal entry to make sure that the debits equal the credits, and we highlighted them. Okay, now those were my two journal pages right there and there. All right, and I talked a bit about if I had made a mistake, what to do with that. Okay, remember this set of books is correct. There are no errors in it. So I'm just going to make up errors as I go along. But the whole idea is for you to be able to see the procedure. And so I have my two journal pages. Now, if we said, all of our journal entries are correct, well, the next step in our accounting procedure, our bookkeeping procedure, is to post these journal entries into our ledger accounts. Well, this becomes a little bit more tedious, so I have a general ledger here. Now, the general ledger is going to be spread out over 3 pages. 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of tedious, and it's going to be bouncing back and forth because what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take, and I have this here copy of my journal, and I'm going to make a copy of all of my general ledger. Right? And again, I put the originals on the side so that when I make a mistake, when I find the mistake, I can correct the originals. All right. And now I'm going to take a different color highlighter. All right. Yellow and blue make green. So I'm just going to pick blue next as the highlighter. Now, this here becomes a lot more tedious because I have to go line item by line item and make sure that I'm posting these correctly. Remember, I'm just rearranging the information here. So I have 59,670 under my cash account, which is account number 11, right? Well, I come down to my general ledger account, and here's account number 11 cash, and I see that I put on the debit side the 5960, so I highlight it, and I come back up here, and I highlight that. That means I posted that particular amount correctly in the correct general ledger account. And I'm going to go through each and every line item here. Okay, so now I have a credit of 59,607 to Billy Ayers Capital, which is account 31. Well, I come down to account 31 right here, and April 1st, here's my posting reference. I have a credit for 59,670, so that's right. And I come back up and I highlight that. Okay. I go to my next journal entry. I have 1370 to rent expense, which is account 53. Well, I have to come down to account 53. We're account 53 rent expense here. And on the debit side, I have 1370, so I know that's right. And I will come up and I will highlight that. Again, a credit of 1370 to cash. So I come over to the cash account and there's my credit of 1370. Okay. And that's all I'm doing is I'm just going back and forth, I mean, for each and every one of these here line items. Okay, I have a debit to prepaid insurance for 870, which is account 14. Well, I come down to prepaid insurance, account 14, and I had a debit of 870, okay, which is right. And so I come back up and I highlight that. I have, again, a credit 870 to cash. So here's the credit column under my cash account, 870, so I highlight it. Now notice I'm not paying attention to the balances over here, okay? Yeah, you have to do the math, and you'll see where I get that in just a minute. Well, as part of the next set of procedure, but I'm not interested in these balances. I'm just interested in making sure that I post it to the debits and the credits in the correct side for each and every account. Okay, so, and I have to highlight that. Okay, so if I had made a mistake, let's say under that cash account, I had actually put the 870 over on the debit side. Okay, well, I know that's wrong, and so I would go back to my originals and I would correct my originals. Okay, that would allow me to create a new balance, and with that new balance I can then transfer that over to my trial balance, foot it, and see if it brought my account, my debits back into equaling my credits. Okay, now again, I didn't make any mistakes here. I mean, there are no mistakes in this journal or this set of books, so I'm just gonna have to, I'm fictitiously talking about things, but I'm also not going to spend a lot more time going through. I mean, I showed you how to do 3 of these. That's the next step in the procedure. You should be going back and forth, highlighting everything, okay, until you find the mistake. So I'm taking a shortcut here just due to time constraints. I'm not going to spend an hour doing the same thing back and forth. You saw the first 3. Go back and review them to get an idea. That is, you see me highlighting each one of these, but in reality is I would be going back and forth and highlighting all of those entries. So and there's a reason why I'm highlighting all of this in, because after we've done this next step in the procedure and I've corrected any errors, okay, my books will then, my copies I should say, should look like this. Okay, so I hope you got that. Okay. I'll just review it real quick. I made copies of my journal and I made copies of my general ledger accounts, and then I'm going to go line item by line item and make sure that whatever the debit amount is, I posted it to the correct general ledger account on the correct side, the debit or credit side. And I would go for this debit, then I go to this credit. I do the next journal entry, the debit and the credit, the next journal entry, debit and credit. I'm going back and forth between the ledger and the journal and making sure that it's posted in the right place, because remember, posting from the journal to the general ledger account is nothing more than rearranging the balances in the accounts. Okay, all right, so let's say I've gone through that entire procedure. Okay, and now I'm at a point where, okay, I need to do the math, right? Because why? I need to create the balances in the general ledger accounts in order to be able to put them on the trial balance. Now, if you're doing books by hand, do not use a handheld calculator. It is too easy to make a mistake. Okay. If you have a printer calculator, that's great. If you can use an Excel spreadsheet, that's great. The Excel spreadsheet will, save a little bit of time. One of the things that I suggest is you don't just do the, run the numbers, meaning like if I was going to do the cash account here and I was going to do it in an Excel spreadsheet, okay, I would go and I would add up the debit columns, the debit column. In other words, I'd put the numbers in 59,670, 3890, 1230, 2670, and I would come out with, some amount. Okay. Well, I wouldn't do it just one time. Okay. I would do it actually 3 times. Okay. And the reason why is because I could come up with, and I'm just going to use some numbers here. Okay. Let's say the first time I ran it and I ended up with 15. Okay. And then I run the numbers again on the same spreadsheet or the printer calculator and I ended up with 15 also. Well, it is possible that I had when I did it the first time, I did it wrong. And when I did it the second time, I made the same exact mistake. Now, if I run it a third time and I end up with 15, then I can be relatively sure that I didn't make a mistake and that 15 is the actual balance for that particular column. But if I ended up with 15, 15, and then let's say 13, okay, what I want to do is I want to go back and see why I ended up with 13 instead of 15. Maybe I made a mistake here and here, and reality says it should have been 13 and 13. Okay, it's pretty difficult to run the number 3 times. The probability is very, very low that you made a mistake if you can run the number 3 times and get 13, 13, and 13. Yes, you run it once, there's a probability, that some probability that you made a mistake. Yes, if you run it a second time, there's a lower probability that you made the same mistake, but there is a probability. If you run it 3 times, it's very rare that you're going to have the same mistake 3 times. I mean, obviously, if you had 15 and then you had 13 and then you had 15 again, well, then you would go back and try to see, most likely you had a mistake in the 13 column and it should have been 15. Okay, and then that would be all together. So what I'm getting at here is whenever you're doing the math, use a printer calculator and run the tape 3 times, or use an Excel spreadsheet and run it 3 times in order to make sure that the numbers are right. Okay, so back to where we were. We have, we added up our debits, we added up our credits, okay, and then we subtract one from the other, and that would give us our ending balance. Okay, now if I'm relatively sure that that's correct, okay, then I'm going to highlight that balance in that account. Okay, now remember, I'm just doing the math. So here, yeah, I only have one entry on the debit side and one entry on the credit side, so when I subtract one from the other, it should be that balance. Well, I have only one entry, well, that should be that balance. Now, one of the things I want to point out here is debits and credits. Okay, notice each one of these general ledger accounts has a debit and a credit. Make sure you're getting it right. Okay, up here in the cash account, my debits generally should be greater than my credits. So my balance should be on the debit side. But it is possible to be overdrawn in your cash account and have a credit balance in your cash account. Well, that number should be on the credit side if my credits are greater than my debits. Okay, my receivables generally should be a debit. That's why this idea of a normal balance, what increases, what increases that account, the normal balance. All of your asset accounts should be debits. Your liabilities should have credit balances, equity credit balances, revenue credit balances, and expenses debit balances. Okay. I go to prepaid insurance and say, okay, yeah, that's $870. I'm sure about that. Furniture. Again, you're doing this on the copies. Okay. 7,900. Here I do the math. Okay. Whatever I get here for my debits, and then whatever I get from my credits, I subtract one from the other, and in this case here, my credits are greater than my debits, so I should have a balance in my credit account on the credit side of 8280, which is correct. If it's correct, I highlight it. If it's not, I go back to my originals and I see where I made a mistake and correct the mistake. Okay. Here I have, a credit of 60,900, debit of 2190. So I'm just getting the balances in all of these accounts. Okay, and when I've done that, now I'm into the process of transferring over to my trial balance. I'm 14 minutes in. I think I could do this. Now actually I'm going to stop here and then make a third video and show that part of the process. Okay.